You've been lied to. Not in a malicious way, but in a mythic one. We all have. From the moment we first heard stories of the Chosen One, we were seeded with a fantasy. A fantasy that the Chosen One is this flawless, glowing figure, called upon by the universe to save the world. That they suddenly discover their powers, rise up, defeat evil, and restore balance. That they are either born special or anointed by some cosmic force, separate from the rest of us. But what if I told you that everything you believe about the Chosen One is not only incomplete, it's a distortion of the deeper truth? What if the real Chosen One is not who you think it is, not what you've been told? And most importantly, what if you are closer to that path than you ever imagined, but you've been running from it your entire life? Here's something I've learned, not just by studying ancient wisdom, but by living it, bleeding with it, burning through it. The real chosen ones, they don't feel chosen at all. In fact, most of them spend decades believing they're broken. They aren't exalted by the world. They're usually exiled, misunderstood, misdiagnosed. They feel like black sheep in their families, outcasts in their communities, and invisible in conversations that never seem to touch the depth they live in. Sound familiar? That's not a coincidence. That's a signature. Because the real chosen ones aren't handed a sword, they're handed silence. They're not given a throne, they're given a wound. And from that wound, the true power begins to awaken. But here's the part nobody talks about. The chosen one doesn't become powerful because they were chosen. They become chosen because they choose, again and again. In every moment where it would be easier to go numb, they choose to feel. In every moment where it would be easier to conform, they choose to stand alone. In every moment where the world begs them to sleepwalk, they choose to stay awake. That's the real test. Not whether you can perform miracles, but whether you can stay present in a world that's addicted to distraction. Whether you can stay honest in a culture that thrives on illusion. Whether you can stay soft in a system that rewards hardness. And that choice, it costs everything. Because the real chosen one must die 1,000 ego deaths before they can be reborn into who they truly are. So ask yourself this: have you spent your life waiting to be chosen? Or have you been quietly choosing yourself while the world looked the other way? Because the difference between the two is everything. Waiting to be chosen keeps you in a loop of seeking validation. It makes you susceptible to false authorities, to spiritual performance, to chasing enlightenment like a prize. But choosing yourself, that's the revolution. That's when you stop asking for permission to be who you are. That's when you realize the universe never needed you to be perfect. It needed you to be authentic. It needed you to be raw. It needed you to be unapologetically human, because only by being human can you become divine. But here comes the twist. The chosen one doesn't awaken and suddenly become enlightened. No, they awaken and suddenly everything falls apart. The relationships that were built on performance, they crumble. The career that was built on compromise, it implodes. The identity that was built on survival, it begins to rot. And in that collapse, you're not given a map. You're not given a guidebook. You're not given an audience. You're given silence. And this is the part where most people turn back. They think they've failed. But the truth is, they've finally stepped into the fire. Because the fire doesn't come after you become the chosen one. The fire makes you the chosen one. In that fire, you meet parts of yourself you didn't know existed. You meet your rage, your grief, your prayer, adjure. Meet the versions of you that hid in shame, that begged to be enough, that sacrificed your soul just to be loved. And here's the paradox. You can't become who you are without facing who you've been. You can't claim your power without first naming your pain. The chosen one is not someone who escapes the shadow. It's someone who integrates it, who befriends it, who learns to see the divine not only in the light but in the dark, messy, unfiltered moments where most people look away. And that's the real initiation. Not into perfection, but into presence. So let me ask you something deeper. What would happen if you stopped trying to become the chosen one, and instead realized you've been one all along? What part of you would have to die in order for that truth to live? What illusions would you have to burn? What identities would you have to grieve? Because the real chosen ones are not waiting for signs. They are the sign. They're not waiting for the right time. They are the time. They're not waiting to be discovered. They're remembering who they are. And in that remembrance, they stop playing small. They stop apologizing for their depth. They stop editing their truth to be accepted. They rise, not above others, but into themselves. And here's the last thing I'll say in this part of the journey. The real chosen one doesn't walk a path of glory. They walk a path of responsibility. They carry codes for the collective. They feel pain that isn't just theirs. They break cycles not for applause, but for liberation. They don't need to be worshipped. They need to be witnessed. And in being witnessed, they give permission for others to remember their own power. Because the chosen one was never meant to be a singular savior. That too is a lie. The real chosen ones are many. They are here, now, scattered across the globe like seeds. And maybe, just maybe, you are one of them. I won't lie to you. Awakening is not what it looks like on social media. It doesn't begin with light beaming out of your third eye or some grand cosmic mission handed to you in a dream. It often begins with loss, with confusion, with your life falling apart while everyone else seems to be thriving. You look around and wonder, what's wrong with me? But nothing is wrong. Something is awakening. And when truth wakes up inside of you, it cannot coexist with the lies you've built your life upon. So the lies begin to fall. The relationships built on performance dissolve. The career driven by ego collapses. The identity forged in trauma begins to crack. And it feels like death. Because it is. It's the death of who you thought you needed to be, and the birth of who you really are. This is the sacred burden of knowing. When you start to see things as they really are, you can't unsee them. When you begin to feel energy, you can't ignore what's unspoken. When your intuition sharpens, you can no longer pretend to believe the stories you were fed. You begin to detach, not because you're cold, but because your soul is tired of pretending. And that detachment, it's mistaken for arrogance, for rebellion, for being too much. But deep down, what's happening is that you're shifting from living in reaction to the external, to living in alignment with the internal. You're no longer asking, what do they want from me? You're asking, what is my soul asking me to become? And that shift cost you everything that was never real. It cost you the comfort of fitting in, the safety of being understood, the illusion of certainty. But in return, it gives you something priceless: sovereignty, the ability to stand in your truth, even if it isolates you, the courage to follow your path even when no one claps, the strength to hold your vision even when the world calls you crazy. That's the paradox of the chosen one. You awaken to serve the collective, but the first thing you must do is separate from it, because you can't heal what you're still entangled in. You can't lead what you're still afraid to outgrow. And so, the loneliness arrives. And it's not ordinary loneliness, it's existential. It's the ache of seeing through the veil while everyone else is still worshiping the projection. It's the grief of knowing the truth but having no one to share it with. It's the pain of watching people you love cling to their suffering because healing would mean letting go of who they think they are. And you're sitting there holding lifetimes of wisdom and no one's asking the right questions. That's not ego. That's the cost of consciousness. The more you see, the less you can participate in the game. And yet you're still here. Why? Because some part of you knows that your presence alone is a prayer. That your energy is doing work even when your words fall on deaf ears. So how do you survive this part of the journey? You stop trying to be understood. You stop trying to explain your path to people who are not on it. You stop trying to drag others into the light before they're ready to see. Instead, you anchor into your own being. You start to become the thing you were chasing. You become your own validation, your own home, your own source of truth. And slowly, the loneliness transforms. It becomes solitude. It becomes spaciousness. It becomes power. Because in the silence, you meet the part of you that's eternal. The part of you that remembers why you came here. And that remembrance, that's the real beginning. Here's where it gets even more real. The moment you fully accept your role as a chosen one, not in ego, but in devotion, the universe begins to test you, not to punish you, but to refine you. You'll be asked to walk away from what you thought you couldn't live without. You'll be asked to trust your inner knowing when the outer world gives you no evidence. You'll be asked to hold your frequency while everyone around you collapses into fear. And each time you say yes to your soul, something ancient within you activates, a memory, a code, a strength that doesn't come from this world. Because the truth is, your awakening didn't start in this lifetime. You've been preparing for this for centuries, and now it's time. So let me ask you a question that could change everything. What are you still clinging to that your soul has already outgrown? Who are you still trying to become that was only ever a survival mask? What truth are you still avoiding because it would require you to leave behind a version of you that everyone else loves, but you no longer recognize? These are the real questions of the chosen one. Not what's my mission, not when will I be ready, but what am I still afraid to lose? Because what you're afraid to lose is exactly what's blocking your next becoming. And when you finally let it go, you don't just awaken, you initiate. You stop being a seeker, and you start becoming a guide, not because you wanted to be, but because you couldn't be anything else. Here's the truth no one tells you. The chosen one doesn't come here to be rescued. They come here to remember. And the remembering is violent. It strips. It burns. It shatters the illusions that have kept you safe, comfortable, numb. You don't get to bypass the pain. You're not gifted immunity from suffering. In fact, you often feel more. More loss, more grief, more pressure, more responsibility. Because the soul knows that remembrance cannot happen in comfort. It happens in collapse. It happens when everything you thought would save you fails, and the only thing left is the voice in your heart whispering, "You were never meant to be saved. You were meant to awaken." That whisper is everything. It's the thread that guides you home. The lie of the chosen one myth is that someone finds them, trains them, gives them the magic. But that's not your story. No one's coming to hand you the sword, because the sword is inside of you. And the only way to find it is to face the parts of yourself you've spent lifetimes running from. The abandonment, the shame, the guilt, the rage. The real initiation is in embracing these shadows, not defeating them. You don't ascend by rising above your humanity. You awaken by descending fully into it, into the mess, into the raw, into the ache that says, "Why was I born into a world that doesn't see me?" And the answer is, because you were never meant to be seen by the world. You were meant to see through it. And when you do, you stop waiting for signs and start becoming one. You stop looking for miracles and start realizing you are one. Not because of what you can do, but because of what you've survived. You carry sacred technology in your nervous system. You are encoded with memory, with wisdom, with ancient truths that cannot be taught in schools or found in books. That's why your journey is so hard. It's not about learning something new. It's about unlearning everything false, every identity that was projected onto you, every role you had to play to be loved, every mask you wore to survive. The real you lives beneath all of that. And that you, that's the one the world has been waiting for. Let's go deeper. Have you noticed how the more you awaken, the less you crave external validation? How the applause starts to feel hollow? How the compliments feel like echoes in a room you no longer live in? That's not depression. That's clarity. That's your soul no longer being seduced by the matrix. You start to see that success means nothing if it costs your peace. That connection means nothing if it costs your truth. That love means nothing if it requires self-abandonment. This is the stage where the real chosen ones walk away. Not because they're above it all, but because they're finally in it all, fully, fiercely, without compromise. They stop chasing the world and start creating one from the inside out. You begin to realize that your path is not about saving others. That too is a distortion. The savior complex is a trap. You came here not to fix, but to embody. To be a living transmission of what's possible when a soul refuses to betray itself. And from that embodiment, others are inspired to remember who they are. Not because you told them, but because your presence reminded them. That's the new frequency of leadership. Not control, not authority, but resonance. The chosen one doesn't lead with answers. They lead with alignment. They don't gather followers. They awaken leaders. So what do you do now that you've remembered? You walk. You walk forward even when your legs shake. You speak even when your voice trembles. You hold your truth even when no one claps. And slowly the world begins to bend around your authenticity. Not because you forced it, but because you became inevitable. That's the power of the chosen one. Not to dominate, but to radiate. Not to conform, but to transform. And transformation begins with presence. With the courage to be real in a world that rewards the fake. With the willingness to be still when everyone else is performing. With the devotion to stay true, especially when it costs you everything. So I'll leave you with this. If you stopped trying to be saved and started remembering your own divinity, what would you do differently today? How would you speak? Who would you walk away from? What would you stop tolerating? What would you finally say yes to? Because that's the real path. It's not about waiting for the universe to choose you. It's about realizing it already did. The question is, will you choose yourself back?